we hear about the birth of John the Baptist, he is the forerunner that is prophesied about in the book of Malachi. This figure who is going to be coming in the spirit of the prophet Elisha to turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers. Now, this is a very important purification that needs to take place even today. We could say that there is a crisis of authority, and it is twofold. It's not just authority that is in trouble today, that there is this sense that some people have of authority as being something to come and to rule and to dominate. But really, authority, according to the understanding of the Church and the understanding of the Second Vatican Council and the understanding of the saints, is one of loving service. Yes, there is sometimes direction, there's sometimes correction, but it's really supposed to be a relationship of love. And that's why we hear in the book of the prophet Malachi this turning of the hearts of the fathers to their children. But the other is the turning of the children's hearts to their fathers. The other crisis of authority that we have today is a malaise in our society that distrusts all authority figures. We could really say that that is infecting us. And we want to be willing to recognize that the purification that the Lord wants to take place, the refining that we hear him speaking about through the prophet Malachi, will touch us as well. You know, Isaiah the prophet, when he received his call, he said to God, "Lord, I am a man of unclean lips in a generation of unclean lips," meaning he recognized that the problems of his society also affected himself. And we want to make sure that we are like Isaiah, that we are willing to recognize where some of these issues today affect us, where we have been infected by what we call the glorification of the self as one's own authority, as the ultimate authority over anything or anyone else. And I say this especially amongst us as Catholics, because whatever side, I've noticed, whatever side in the church that people want to say that they're on, whether they consider themselves liberal or conservative, that basically people will set themselves up as their own authorities and will discount what the magisterium of the church has been trying to say. An example of such has to do with the reception and the misunderstanding of some of what the church has been trying to say about only the permissiveness of receiving a vaccine for COVID. That permission doesn't mean that it's trying to dismiss any moral considerations. It's simply saying that, yes, we recognize that there is a cooperation, a remote cooperation with evil, but at the same time, that if one judges the good of society to be, and the good of one's own health to be greater than that cooperation with evil, that it is permitted to receive one of those vaccines. Now, one of the issues that keeps coming up, however, is, whether we're recognizing as a church that there is a need to continue to fight against the use of any tainted cell lines that come from the result of an abortion. And yet the statements that I see coming out from different places, whether it's the Vatican or whether it's different bishops, keep reminding us that that fight continues no matter what. That it's not one of these, it's all okay or it's all bad kind of a thing. It's something in the middle that causes us to recognize, yes, we don't live in a black and white world. Yes, there are moral truths. And yes, there are things that are intrinsically evil. And yet, we trust the guidance of the church in letting us know what can be morally acceptable without necessarily constraining consciences to agree with that, and recognizing that everybody has the right, if they want to say no to any cooperation with evil, they have that right as well. This is what ends up happening, unfortunately, is that when people will take the sides, they will try to force whoever they disagree with to come to their conclusion. And this is a danger too. Again, it raises up an authority of the self over and above everybody else, so that the strongest are the ones who come out on top in what Pope Benedict would call the dictatorship of relativism. But we do not live in a relativistic church. We live in a church that tries its best to reflect with the centuries and millennia of Catholic moral teaching, the centuries and millennia of reflecting upon the Word of God, recognizing what we absolutely cannot accept in any regard, and what we can, without sinning, accept in regards to remote cooperation with evil. Now, this is not to say that anybody should go and, I'm not trying to put any moral pressure on anybody to go and get a vaccine. I hope that's clear. But what I'm trying to say is, the issue isn't as black and white as people on either side of the issue are trying to make it seem. It's a little bit complicated. And this is one of the things that I think is important when it comes to being faithful people. We live in a complicated world. There is the mystery of living in this tension at times. And it's when we don't want to live in tension, we try to skew things to one side or another. And that's really our own comfort that sometimes seeks that. So to live as the children of God, we want to ask the Lord to be willing that we may be willing by His grace to live in that tension, listening to the church's wisdom, that is, taking it into consideration, prayerfully discerning it, and deciding, but at the same time having a love and a fidelity to the church and to its teaching, hopefully recognizing the goodwill of the pastors of souls who are trying their best to lead with love.